In this lesson, we're going to look at the header section of our HTML code. So we've identified it that we've got essentially 4 or 3 separate areas within it. So we've got our main logo area, we've got a nav bar, and we've got a search box. So within the nav, maybe I'm going to ID this as well, because this was going to allow us to reuse the nav tag when we need it as later on. So this is our main nav bar. And this is how we're just identifying with the ID. So we've got everything identified with IDs, and this gives us the ability to access it within our CSS. So let's open up our CSS editor, and first of all, maybe let's just do something for the main header. And I'm going to add a border there so that we can identify where it's located. Probably going to get rid of this later. I'm not sure how this is going to look as we go through the course, but just so that we can identify the section that we're working with solid, and we'll just make it a black border. So this is essentially that nav area is the section that we're working with, and we can also do a margin around it, but let's just leave that out for now so that we can maybe margin it later on. So the first thing that we're looking at within our header is a logo. So we want to use and identify this logo area and maybe present it a little bit better. So we've got that. We've got a company name there, and we've got a small for a company slogan. So let's identify logo, and here I'm going to make some spacing there so we can bring that up. So within logo, we've got div and we've got small. So this it's not really showing up that great. So maybe instead of just logo, we want to have logo div. So the first div that's contained within the logo, and I want to make this big. So font size. So I'm going to do font size 28 pixels. Save that and just move that over a little bit so you can see it. So now it stands out a little bit more. I think the small is okay. We can just leave that for now, and we'll move on to the navigation menu, because this is really the most important part of our navigation area. So maybe actually I'm going to even save that till a little bit later on. So we've got our logo identified there, and next I want to identify the search form or the search box there that we've created. So let's see, we've given an ID of search, and we want to move this one around, and we're going to move this around within our HTML here. So we don't want it sitting under here, but maybe we want it sitting on the right hand side for now. So let's move this search over, and we're going to position it absolute. And by positioning absolute, this gives us the ability to move it around to anywhere that we want it to appear. We're also going to preset a width of it, so we're going to give it 150 pixels width, and we're also going to now we can position it since we've given a position of absolute, and we're going to pull it in from the right because we want to sit on the right hand side, so 20 pixels from the right, and refresh it. I'm not sure why it's not exactly taking that in, but either way, so we're positioning it on the right there because it's within that header area, and it's taking the default of being right here at the bottom. So we want to set an actual bottom position for it. So maybe we do something like 15 pixels on the bottom, and we can see that that moves it actually underneath that main container, and this is where we need to come up with z-index, because this will actually move it on top of that container. So essentially we do want it floating around, and the way that z-index works is that everything with all the elements within your web page are actually layered, so they're kind of stacked. So if you think back where we had those comics and we have one layer on top of the other on top of the other, so the higher of a number it is, the higher of a position it's going to get on top of the other layers. So when we do that, we can see that we've got our search box and it's actually appearing all the way down there. So let's take a quick look and see why that is. And the reason that it's appearing all the way down here is because we haven't actually preset height for the header. So it's assuming that the header is the full size of the available page when it loads. So we need to preset a size for the header to contain that information, and this is where we can set a height of it. So I'm going to do a height of, probably needs just over 100 pics, so maybe 120. Save that. And now when I refresh it, we see it's still down there, and that's because we have to position the header, and we're going to position at relative. And what relative positioning does, so now we see we've moved it all the way up, and relative allows us to position to its normal position. So any positioning that we're doing of elements that are contained within it are going to position accordingly. So if our relative position of our header is 0, 0, then we know that the search box will move to the correct positioning of it. And we've got to also maybe move that search box over from the right, so maybe about 30. And we see that, so we've moved it 30 over from the right, and this gives us that positioning in that little buffer area there. So it's not hanging outside of our main container. And we see even when we resize it, it still stacks really nice and neatly. And what we're going to do whenever we're resizing the page, because eventually this navigation bar, which we're going to be doing in the next lesson, this is actually going to take up that full width. So eventually at some point we're going to have to pop our search box right up to the top. Or if we wanted to, according to our design, we can always start out with it on the top. So maybe we could do that as well. And this is as easy as updating this. So we could do top 15 pics and refresh it, and we can see that the search box there, now it's aligned top. So it's aligning itself really nicely with this content area where we've got our div and our logo. And now looking at that, this is maybe something that we want to move around as well. So we can do the same thing that we did with the search box, where we can position it, and we can give it an absolute position, and this will give us the ability to actually set where it's falling into place within that head section. So see when we do absolute that they stack one on top of the other. So this is something that we're still going to have to fix with the navigation, but for now let's give it an actual position location. So we're going to move it left 10 pics, and we're going to move it top 10 pics, and see if that looks a little bit better. So see that the company name gets positioned there, and actually I should have done this outside of that. So logo div, and so do that, because we're actually looking at that entire logo container there. So the company name and the slogan. So next we're going to have to take a look at and fix this navigation. And this is really the fun part about CSS, because building out these navigation bars is something that I've always really enjoyed, and that's coming up in the next lesson. We're going to transform this unordered list into an actual navigation bar looking menu. So it's coming up.